I gave my whole life to raising my son. I worked, I sacrificed. I built a home for him with my bare hands. But the day he married, everything changed. His wife looked me straight in the eye and told me to get out of the very house I helped create. My son stood there in silence. I left with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. But what she never expected was that I'd return, and I wasn't alone. When she opened that door and saw who stood beside me, her face turned pale as a ghost. I wasn't born into wealth. Everything I had, I earned through sweat and sacrifice. When my husband passed away, my world shattered, but I didn't break. I poured every ounce of energy into raising my son, Michael. He became my pride and joy, the reason I kept going when life was unbearably cruel. I worked double shifts, saved every penny, and denied myself comforts just so Michael could have the best education, the finest clothes, and a chance at a life I never had. By the time he graduated, I thought my struggles were finally worth it. He was becoming a man of his own, with a bright future ahead. Then came her Samantha, beautiful, sharp-tongued, with a smile that could hide a dagger. From the moment Michael introduced us, something about her unsettled me. She was polite at first, but her eyes held something cold. I ignored it. After all, every mother thinks no one is good enough for her son, right? When they married, I welcomed her with open arms. I cooked her favorite meals, shared family traditions, and tried desperately to make her feel at home. But slowly, little by little, the warmth in the house disappeared. And one evening, she dropped the bomb. "Margaret," she said, her voice sugar-coated but sharp underneath, "I think it's time you moved out. This is our house now." I froze. Our house, the very house I had helped build, pay for, and protect. The woman I had accepted as family had just declared me unwanted. I left that night with only a suitcase, but in my heart, a storm was brewing. What Samantha didn't know was that fate had other plans, and someone was about to walk back into my life who would change everything. The night Samantha told me to leave, I felt my world collapse. I looked at my son, Michael, waiting for him to stand up, to defend me, to remind his wife that this was still my home too. But he said nothing. His silence was louder than any words. "Mom," he muttered, his eyes avoiding mine. Maybe it's for the best. You deserve your own space." My own space? I had spent decades building his world, and now he couldn't spare me a corner of it. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. I went to my room, packed a small suitcase with the few things that mattered most: my husband's watch, some old family photographs, and a worn-out Bible that had carried me through the darkest storms. As I walked toward the door, Samantha leaned casually against the wall, her arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Take care, Margaret," she said sweetly. "Don't worry, we'll visit you." Her words were daggers. Visit me? As if I were some burden, an afterthought, someone to check on occasionally. The night air was cold as I stepped outside, pulling my coat tighter. I didn't even know where I would go. The house I had poured my soul into was no longer mine. The son I had raised with every ounce of love had turned his back on me. For days, I stayed with a distant cousin, but lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my heart ached with betrayal. I replayed that moment again and again. Samantha's smug face, Michael's silence. The pain cut deep, but beneath it all, something else was growing. It wasn't just grief. It was resolve. If they thought they could cast me aside so easily, they were wrong. Life has a way of bringing justice when you least expect it. And then, fate stepped in. At the small church I attended, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. A woman named Helen. She had been my neighbor long ago, before she moved to another city. Her presence felt like a ray of light in my darkest days. She listened as I poured my heart out, every detail of the betrayal, every wound still fresh. Her eyes narrowed as I spoke, but not with pity, with a kind of fire I hadn't seen in years. "Margaret," she said, her voice steady, "maybe it's time Samantha learns that actions have consequences." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't know it yet, but Helen was about to become the answer to my prayers. And when I returned to that house with her by my side, Samantha's smug confidence would vanish. I thought I had lost everything. But with Helen back in my life, the tide was turning. And Samantha? She had no idea the storm that was coming her way. The days after being cast out were some of the loneliest of my life. I stayed on a small cot at my cousin's place, clutching my Bible at night, whispering prayers I wasn't sure were being heard. Betrayal cuts deepest not from enemies, but from those you once called your own. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Samantha's smirk. Every time I tried to rest, Michael's silence replayed in my mind. A son's silence can be more painful than 1,000 insults. But one Sunday morning, as I sat quietly at the back pew of the church, fate intervened. Margaret, a soft voice called. I turned, and there she was, Helen, my old neighbor, my companion from younger days. Her hair was streaked with silver now, but her eyes burned with the same intelligence and fire I remembered. We embraced tightly, tears welling up. After the service over coffee, I told her everything, every cruel word, every cold glance, every wound that Samantha had carved into my heart. Helen didn't interrupt. She listened. And when I was done, she set her cup down with deliberate calm. Margaret, she said firmly, you've been wronged, but you're not powerless. You still have rights, and you still have a home. Her words jolted me. But Samantha, she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Samantha is ignorant of the law. You contributed to that house, didn't you? Mortgage payments, bills, repairs. I nodded slowly. Yes, of course, for years. Then she has no authority to throw you out, Helen declared. And Margaret, I'm a lawyer now. Property law. I know exactly how to handle people like her. I stared at her, stunned. Could this really be possible? After weeks of helplessness, here was a lifeline. Helen reached across the table and took my hand. You raised a son. You survived heartbreak. Don't let this woman break you. It's time you stopped being a victim. It's time you came back stronger. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The bitterness in my heart was still there, but now it was laced with something sharper, determination. Over the next few weeks, Helen guided me through the process. We collected documents, old receipts, tax papers, legal forms, proof that I wasn't just a guest in that house, but its rightful co-owner. She drew up letters, prepared filings, and with every step, I felt the pieces of my life coming back together. For the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and saw not just a weary widow, not just a discarded mother, but a woman who still had a voice. I was ready. Samantha thought she had silenced me for good, but with Helen by my side, I was preparing for a return she would never see coming, one that would wipe the smirk right off her face. The day finally came when all the papers were in order. Helen had neatly stacked them in her leather briefcase, her eyes glinting with quiet confidence. Margaret, she said as we sat together that morning, you've spent too long being silent. Today, you walk back into your house not as a guest, not as a burden, but as an owner. Samantha won't be expecting this. Her words gave me strength. My hands trembled as I folded the last of my clothes into my small suitcase. But it wasn't fear this time, it was anticipation. The taxi ride felt longer than ever. As we pulled up to the driveway, memories came flooding back. The laughter of Michael as a child playing on the lawn. My husband and I painting the porch together. The holidays where I stayed up all night cooking for the family. This wasn't just a building, it was the story of my life. And Samantha had tried to erase me from it. I wasn't going to let her win. Helen stepped out first, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I followed close behind, gripping my suitcase. My heart pounded, but I held my head high. Samantha opened the door, her face twisting into that same smug smile I remembered all too well. Well, if it isn't Margaret. She purred. Back again. Did you forget something? Her voice dripped with mockery. But then she noticed Helen beside me, calm, confident, holding a briefcase. Samantha's smile faltered. I looked her dead in the eye. No, Samantha, I didn't forget anything. I came back home. Before she could retort, Helen stepped forward. Her voice was measured, professional, but sharp enough to cut steel. Mrs. Davis, she began, I'm Helen Carter, legal counsel. For Margaret, I advise you to listen very carefully. Michael appeared behind his wife, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" I turned to him, my voice steady but heavy with years of pain. "What's going on, Michael? Is that your wife tried to erase me? But this house is as much mine as it is yours. I built this life for us, and I will not be pushed aside." Helen opened her briefcase and laid out the documents: mortgage statements, utility bills, tax receipts, legal filings. Every page carried proof of my sacrifices, my sweat, my claim. "Margaret is a co-owner of this property," Helen stated firmly. "You cannot, under any circumstance, evict her. If you attempt to deny her rights, we will proceed with legal action that neither of you are prepared for." The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha's face turned ashen, her lips parting, but no sound escaping. It was as though the life drained out of her in an instant. The smugness vanished, replaced by raw fear. Michael rubbed his forehead, caught between his wife and his mother. But for once, I didn't wait for his approval. I lifted my suitcase, stepped past Samantha, and crossed the threshold. My heart pounded as my feet touched the familiar hardwood floor. I was home. The air felt different this time, lighter, freer. I wasn't walking in as a broken woman begging for a corner to exist in. I was walking in as someone who had reclaimed her dignity. Behind me, I heard Samantha's voice, shaky, trembling. This isn't fair. This isn't over." I turned back, my eyes calm but piercing. "No, Samantha. This is justice, and it's only just begun." I had taken my home back. But I knew Samantha's pride wouldn't let this end quietly. The real test was still ahead, when Michael would finally be forced to choose between the woman who raised him and the woman he married. The house was quiet, but tension rippled through every corner. I had reclaimed my space, but I knew this battle was far from over. Samantha wasn't the type to bow gracefully. Her pride was too sharp, her tongue too quick. In the days that followed, her attitude grew colder. She slammed cupboards, muttered under her breath, and made no effort to hide her disdain. But unlike before, I wasn't shaken. I no longer cowered or tiptoed. Every time she tried to undermine me, I reminded her, calmly, firmly, that I belonged here. Michael Cotton. The middle began to crack under the strain. One evening, he finally snapped. "Enough," he shouted, slamming his fist on the dining table. "I can't live like this anymore." Samantha glared at him, her eyes burning. "It's her or me, Michael. Decide." The room went still. I sat, quietly watching the son I had raised face the hardest choice of his life. My heart ached, but I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I simply looked at him, letting the silence speak for me. Michael's face was pale, his hands trembling. He looked at me, then at Samantha. His jaw tightened. "I can't throw my own mother out," he whispered. "She's my blood. She's the reason I am who I am. If you can't respect that, Samantha, maybe you don't belong here." Samantha's face twisted with fury. She stormed upstairs, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not revenge, but peace. My son had finally remembered who I was to him. Not just a burden, not a shadow, but his mother. Over the next weeks, the cracks in Michael and Samantha's marriage grew wider. She couldn't bear the loss of control. She moved out soon after, leaving Michael confused and broken. But for me, the storm had passed. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp lighting the family photos on the wall. I whispered to myself, it was never about revenge. It was about dignity, about reminding myself that silence does not mean weakness. Life had come full circle. I had been cast out, humiliated, forgotten, but I had returned stronger, not because I wanted to destroy Samantha, but because I refused to let anyone erase the sacrifices of a mother's love. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been wronged, you know the pain, but you also know the strength that comes when you rise again. This channel is a place for voices like ours. Subscribe to Henry Revenge. Share your story in the comments and join a community where no one is silenced and justice always finds its way home.